Alright, what's up guys? It's K-Rod here. I'm back with another good video for you boxing fans out here today. Um, yeah, let's talk about Mr. David Benavidez that said the other day that I guess he was talking on that Mexican bullshit boxing channel, Little Giant Boxing, right? He said on that YouTube channel the other day that he would go down to 160 pounds to challenge Jermall Charlo for his belt. I wanted to criticize that. I personally don't believe that's a good idea for David Benavidez, but I don't blame him for saying something like that. I think David Benavidez is a amazing fighter. I think David beats the shit out of Jermall Charlo at 168 if Charlo is fighting the way he did against Montiel. But I could be wrong. I think Charlo, if he stays disciplined and he has, like the same technical drive like he did in the J-Rock and Dervyachenko fight, I think Charlo can easily dominate David Benavidez. But I think, honestly, it's a 50-50 fight. I think Charlo knows that David Benavidez, he's not there to play around. He's there to come at you. He's there to use a lot of defensive, or I would say offensive pressure, because David Benavidez is a offensive pressure fighter at best, but whenever he sees opportunities where he presses the action and he makes a fight, which, he's a rough, rugged fighter, and by any means necessary, if he finds that one opening to break you psychologically and physically, I think David Benavidez can easily defeat you. His biggest flaw would just be not being disciplined enough on defense. I think a very defensive, sturdy version of David Benavidez would be a very difficult fight for anybody. But with a guy like Jermall Charlo, who's tall, he's rangy, he's very persistent with his jab, and he uses a lot of good, outer leg reflexes to actually hold a fighter off balance. I think Jermall Charlo can really give David a really tough fight. But here is the absolute problem with David Benavidez and Jermall Charlo. Both of them get hit at unnecessary positions in a fight that makes themselves very vulnerable. So they're very vulnerable to a lot of unnecessary blows. And I think the way these guys fight stylistically would be that David, he throws a lot of smothering punches, and Jermall Charlo, he doesn't throw enough jabs to keep an opponent away from him. And I think Jermall Charlo, he's a terrific fighter at middleweight, but I think at super middleweight and above, he would probably get stopped because he doesn't have that proper discipline on defense to keep his jab at bay and be disciplined all 12 rounds, which I think he can do it. He just chooses not to because he's gotten way too comfortable by trying to bang it out with somebody when he should know that, look, if you got the height and reach advantage over somebody, or if you have the better technicality over a certain fighter, then by all means, go for it. But it's like Jermall Charlo doesn't do any of that. We've seen that in multiple, occasions from Jermall Charlo, and I think Jermall Charlo, he understands what his flaws are, because he knows what the problem is, but he chooses not to fix it. And I think that is what's going to haunt him if he fights a guy like David Benavidez right now. If he performed the way he did against Montiel, being used in the David Benavidez fight, if that were to happen, and I think David Benavidez would brutally stop him. But then again, I can't say that for every instance of what would happen in that fight, but the way David Benavidez looked and the way Jermall Charlo looked, they look pretty similar in a C to B grade level performance. I would say both of them did not look great all the way through, and I think David Benavidez, he looked a little bit sluggish, and Jermall Charlo, he looked a bit rusty. I don't think Jermall Charlo, he really took Montiel that seriously. I thought Charlo, he just went in there to just have fun and get his ass beat, you know, unnecessarily, in the sense of he took a lot of unnecessary blows from Montiel. He should have just straight up stopped Montiel when he saw the opportunity, and I think Charlo, he was just playing around with his food. He should have been the one pressing the action, using a lot of body shots, move around, don't let Montiel cut the ring off, and I think Charlo would have easily stopped Montiel if he used a lot of boxing IQ or ring IQ. But I think Charlo knew that fight shouldn't have gone the distance, and unfortunately it did. But good enough for David Benavidez. He proved that he stopped pretty much his last two opponents, and he's been dominating everybody. I won't be surprised if he stops Jose, Uzcategui, because Jose Uzcategui, he's gonna fight David, and the way David fights and the way Jose fights, I don't think Jose would wanna, be on the inside with David. But if David has good defense on top of it, he will give Charlo a lot of issues, and I think that's what David needs to understand now. And I think he's acknowledging that, because a good defensive fighter is a very dangerous fighter, and I think the fighter without the better defensive knowledge and IQ in the fight will always win, no matter how many times you try to say that, oh, that fighter, he can't hit, blah blah blah. But it's like, if you know that this guy has better defense than the other guy, then how the hell is let's just say the heavy-hitted puncher versus the pillow-fisted fighter is going to hit him? Because if that fighter has better defense than the heavy-handed guy, then the heavy-handed guy, he really can't do shit. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I think David Benavidez, I would give him a 60-40 edge over Jermall Charlo. I think him and Charlo understand the deficiencies of what happened, in their fights. And I don't ever see it going that far, in the sense of what's going to happen with the, I guess, fight itself. Because I do think that, it's gonna be a very interesting, fight if it were to get made in the future. But I just think the way Charlo fights, he'll probably leave himself wide open to get knocked out by David Benavidez. But I could be wrong, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not right about these things, and I think Jermall Charlo, he can beat David Benavidez, and I think Charlo, he knows damn well he can beat him, but he's not using his confidence enough to get in the ring, immediately with David Benavidez to have that fight set up. And I think he understands, like, he's also losing out on a lot of money too. Because David Benavidez, he's young, he's fresh, he's 24 years old, and Jermall, he's like fucking what, like 31 years old? And it's just like, Jermall Charlo needs to start making moves. He doesn't have all the time in the world left. I'd say he has like a good 5 years left, or 4 years left. Because, like, your prime is technically over, like, around 35, 36 years old, but then again, I don't think age matters in boxing. Bernard Hopkins, he disproved all the haters, but your prime usually ends around, like, people say 33 years old, but I like to give it till, like, 35. Because, like, if you gotta look at guys like Floyd Mayweather, he was still technically in his prime at 36, so, the prime meter really differs based on how a fighter performs. And if the fighter is going to peak at one point, and then they'll probably go down, and then it really depends on how the fight goes. Because Nonito Donaire, he still has bits and pieces of his prime, but yeah, the younger version of Nonito was beating the shit out of everyone. But compare him to Guillermo Rigondeaux. Rigondeaux probably has like a much better skill set compared to Donaire, but still, Donaire, he's still like one of the best fighters in the world, and he's still daring to be great. So I would say for Jermall Charlo, if he wants to finish up what is left for him to do, and for his career and legacy, uh, I think he should take the David Benavidez fight and probably set it at a catchweight at 164 and give David the ability to keep his power, because 8 pounds is a lot of weight, especially losing 8 pounds of muscle. So I think David knows that his power is not going to be the same at 160. And for me personally, that fight would kind of look really suspect and weird. I don't know how Jermall Charlo would actually think that's going to be a fair fight for David. But if Jermall thinks that that fight is going to give him a free, easy victory, where David, he could be drained out, or he could just get hit and not feel right at 160, because obviously we all know, like, if David beats Jermall Charlo, why the hell would he want to stay at 160? He's just going to bring his ass back up to 168. So I think what's going to happen is that David, he's going to try to press the action of trying to get Jermall out the way. And then once Canelo gets through Caleb Plant, or I would hope Caleb Plant defeats Canelo, I think David's gonna go back and get his mandatory spot, and then boom, he can go out of his way and go back up for 168 for undisputed. But obviously, we all know that Canelo Alvarez, he's not going to probably fight David Benavidez for his undisputed titles if he were to beat Caleb. But if Caleb does beat Canelo, then we already know Caleb Plant and David Benavidez are definitely going to be two of the biggest names at 168 to be the most difficult challenge in their careers. Because obviously both of them, they have beef, and David Benavidez, he wants to knock off Caleb's head off, and it would be pretty interesting to see where that career would go, or where that fight would go, because it's going to be good for their careers. And I think the people that win out of that would be the fans, because everybody knows that Caleb and David, they have to scrap eventually at some point. And I think the best chance for Caleb to fight David is when David probably becomes his mandatory. If David were to see Caleb, if Caleb beats Canelo, and a lot of people want to say Caleb is going to get destroyed by Canelo, and I personally disagree with that. I don't think Caleb is anywhere near a bum compared to like Caleb Smith or Avni Yildirim Shitrum, and who's that other guy that Canelo beat? Billy Joe Saunders. Yeah, I don't see Caleb Plant quitting against Canelo. I think Caleb is gonna fight his ass off, and then until he can't do no more, then yeah, he'll probably wave up the white flag. But I don't think Caleb would do anything like that. I think Caleb is going to box extremely smart. He's probably going to take a lot of chapters or take a lot of notes from what Floyd Mayweather did to Canelo. And if he is successful in re-emulating that style, I don't see how Canelo really beats a slick fighter in Caleb Plant. But I guess we'll find out if Caleb Plant is going to try to work with Canelo to get the fight made. Honestly, I personally see Canelo probably moving up to 175, because he said that if he can't get the Caleb Plant fight, which him and his team are being absolutely greedy by not giving Caleb Plant what he wants, because he obviously wants more money out of this fight for undisputed, and Canelo's not listening to him technically. But if that fight does get made, Caleb Plant is probably going to fight Canelo in September. And then once that's done, then yeah, just go straight for for the stars. Because at this point, David Benavidez, he has so much to gain, because he has multiple opportunities he could go for. He can go for Jermall Charlo, beat him, and if he does beat him, which I'm not saying he will have the higher probability to beat him, I think it's a true 50-50 fight. But if he beats him, he can get that win under his resume, and then move up to 168, dominate 168, because obviously Caleb Plant, if he loses to Canelo and David Benavidez could be the next fight, and then boom, move his dominance to 168, defeat everybody, and then if he wants to move up to 175, he could do it again up there. But I think 168 will be David's weight class because obviously that's his natural weight. I think David will dominate there. But I really don't see how Jermall Charlo could really not let David Benavidez give him like a catch weight, because I think a catch weight would make a lot of sense to have him defend his title against David Benavidez. But either way, let me know what you guys think about this. Do you think this is a good move by David, or do you think David Benavidez should just stay at 168? I personally think this is a bad move because David, he's gonna be at a disadvantage of this fight. Even if he does get rehydrated, it's still like, he's losing muscle and he's sacrificing a lot more stamina on the line, because obviously when you're cutting weight, you could really have some bad conditioning issues. But I guess we'll just find out when that day comes. But yeah, I don't know. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Do you think this is a good idea? And yeah, I'll talk with you guys later. Alright, thank you. Bye.